Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get into a sub question of the IRS. But we're going to talk a little bit about this one. Will Trump kill off the IRS quickly or slowly? Now, one of the hardest parts about this is, we've been talking about this. You listen to me since 2020, but I've kind of known about this since 2010, but I didn't know how it would happen. I remember working on this problem because this organization wanted me to do their accounting. And I was like, I'm not an accountant. I mean, I don't play one on TV either. So, my gosh, what am I supposed to do with that? And I was trying to do some of the bookkeeping points that we were doing. And I mean, I was doing a horrible job. That's just isn't my capability to have that much detail on that kind of stuff. It's just not my thing. Right. And so there was a conversation there. You weren't going to have to pay the IRS anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? And that was my big contact, that white hat contact that we went through so many things. And I mean, I wish he was here today. He died in 2020, and he would be amazed at the stuff that's happening. But Chris actually asks a question. Now, this is a more detailed question than is out there, but she basically said, and she went on about this a little bit more, and I was talking about this, but is the IRS? I mean, IRS is still around. I'm not believing this anymore. It's just called a BS. I get it. I mean, I 1,000% get the idea. She's living on her hope, which is an expectation that the IRS is not going to be there, and yet she's fighting in 2024 with the conversation of the IRS. And she was mentioning something about her husband struggling through with the IRS issues. I get it 1,000%. I'm going to show you some interesting parts because the question is like if it stops and if this Nasara thing happens in the middle of the year, what do they do for that year? Do they refund that taxes for that year? Some people want to tell you that all taxes for all time are all coming back to you, and I don't believe that. You're talking about, again, they're always using that as a fairness conversation. I've answered fairness conversations over and over again. But do I have a problem with taxes coming back from 2021-ish, whatever, last few years? No. You also are dealing with the understanding of someone who, let's just say it happens before January of 25. Okay, Nasara happens before that time frame, and the payroll companies have to catch up to that. What do you do for 2024? Do you let it be paid through, or do you say no, we're not? I mean, because you're talking about people filing taxes. If you think you're going to get money back, you might file your taxes in February, right? And to get what 2024 tax rate was, right? And if the SAR thing is coming and which it's coming like a flood, and I'll explain that here in a sec. But if that thing comes, what do you do about the 24? You can't. You're not just talking about what happens in 25. You've got to deal with that stuff in 24. And where does that cutoff occur? Do they go back a few years? Do they take 2024? Hey man, I think it would be kind of cool if people got 10, 15, 25, 35, whatever $1,000 back in their pocket. Now that kind of thing I can definitely get behind, because what would happen in that realm is that you you literally don't have a problem with people quitting their jobs. I have massive troubles when people talk about, whether they want to save some thousands of dollars a month. And I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about Social Security. I'm talking about a UBI of tens of thousands of dollars, $5,000, $4,000. You got to work. You have to, whatever the circumstance is. People will not work, and they won't work very hard, even still. I know that as a business owner. I see it every day in all kinds of different ways that happens. But what happens with this IRS issue, right? So Chris, kind of backed off her statement when I kind of brought some of these points up. Trump, in the background, over the last several months has talked about, I'm going to kill tips. I'm going to kill overtime. I'm going to kill the the Social Security stuff, right? You can say the words kill, but I'm using the, often that point. And he said it in different ways. And it was the brilliant conversation of President Trump. He talks about overtime, which people who are on overtime don't necessarily always make a lot of money. Now, some of them do make some decent money, but they're not in the six figures kinds of things. But they make decent money. These are hardworking kind of people. But they get screwed all the time by their employers who don't want to pay them overtime pay. Then you have the issue of tips. Tips are considered a bonus. I'm going to show you that one in a second. But that's a considered a bonus kind of thing. Years and years ago when I was working, as a busboy, I got like 5% or 10% of the tips that the waitresses, it was all waitresses at the time when I was working, that they were supposed to get. And it was all cash, right? And I knew the ones who didn't give me the numbers. Why? Because I'm the busboy. I'm walking up there. I see the amount, right? I've seen the whole thing because I might get them some water. I might help them with several different things, right? I saw it. And the reality is those tips are like what drives them. Some of them were making less than minimum wage, hoping that they can get enough money in the tips to be able to make it. And they always kind of put it in the pocket, right? Social Security, ridiculous to charge someone who's on Social Security, make them make these payments, right? And yet Trump talks about this. So let's explain this in a more graphic way. I want to show you, again, you don't have to sit there and detail this sucker out. This is something in QuickBooks. So let's just show you let me blow this up a little bit more. And again, don't get too worried about the exact thing. This is one way someone might enter it in. So let's say an hourly pay of Joe or John, whatever it is, and a clerical person paying on a biweekly basis, right? Entering a minimum wage. Well, obviously minimum wage isn't that, but you get the idea. So he's putting in $11 an hour. He's putting in $16.50 on that kind of way, right? And so he's entering some of those areas. Let's show you another screen. And this is another type of Excel spreadsheet kind of thing, right? And so he's got Matthew, 20 hours, 30 hours, 20 hours, right? Total hours worked in the time frame, total overtime, overtime hour to how many hours they worked, right? So then there's other little calculations. These are the way you can do calcs in the screens. This is kind of a cute way, but then and it comes down with a gross pay. So he's calculating based upon hourly rates, blah, 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 right? So this is how some people will actually put in their gross pay to be able to find the kinds of fields. So it gives you some of that. This is actually a company I utilize. Now, I blew it up and it's a little hard to see. I really like this company. It's called Gusto. Okay, whether or not IRS is ever going to be around, you still have to pay your employees, right? So let's just show you this one here. You've got Holly, who is on a hourly rate. I think it's hourly. It says 80 hours. And actually, no, I take that back. She is a salaried person at $80,000 a year. So it has an hours, it assumes in that time frame, a 2-week period of time, that she's worked 80 hours. You're going to put PTO and other things. You can either put these bonuses or commissions, and it shows her gross pay, right? Whereas Eric making $22 an hour, so he's an hourly kind of guy, worked 15 hours, and then you see the gross pay. Tony over here, blah, 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 right? So you see some of this kind of stuff. Okay. So let's pull that off the screen. So I'm trying to share with you. Here's what I want you to see. 3 things. Number 1, when you put in hourly wages, so go back to what Trump was talking about here. When you put in hourly wages, that is the conversation of killing the overtime. Now I have literally seen IRS guys who do cool YouTube channels, right? And they're going, okay, here's how he's going to do it. And they're calculating like all this other stuff, right? And they're doing the Excel spreadsheets of how they're going to, He's going to delete the overtime thing, but you're going to get paid for overtime, but you're not going to have to pay taxes. And you understand when you, let me show you back to the screen. Sorry, let me bring this up here again. I want you to see when I bring this up on the screen, when it looks at the pay, right? The pay isn't structured differently for Eric over here getting $330, right? The gross pay is how you actually pay the employee based upon, I mean, if they have set amounts that they wanted to take out, or normally what most people will do is you'll put in their deductions, right? They have one state, one federal, three state, three federal, whatever they might do, right? And so they're going to put in those kinds of things. But the gross pay is the number. So even if you saw the typed in commission of, she makes $80,000 a year, makes, $300 in that payroll period, so it's going to be 3376, right? So that would be that kind of number in that way. So again, the hourly piece is taken over here from the overtime point, which is all the hourly, which is that point. The base pay is how you think about Social Security, because they only get a base pay when you think about that. And the tips are considered in bonus structure and in commission structures. They're literally, you can separate it, because I like to separate out bonus pay for some of my employees, but my, ones that are doing more on the sales side, they're going to get a commission. But the IRS doesn't look at it differently, right? For the woman that was making $330, or the guy's making $330, and the woman's making $30,000 in that period of time, they're going to have, if they both have three deductions for, state deductions, it's going to come out that way. So what happens is this. So that I was trying to give you a little bit longer of a statement there. I'm telling you, he said, we're going to kill the IRS. But if he said kill the IRS, he'd freak everyone out. They'd have a million more questions out there. Do you do this slowly, or do you do this all at once? The answer is there's no way to do this slowly. I mean, he talked about, like, I'm going to do 15% or other kinds of things. You keep the military industrial complex in place if you do it slow. Doesn't happen that way. You got to do it all at once. Now, it's gonna hit, and those payroll companies like Gusto, who, by the way, are wonderful, you can still use those as the business owner, right? But you don't have to have all the taxes that come out of there. Would you have Social Security taken out? Yeah. But I think that what will happen too is that there's going to be amounts of monies. There's monies already set in the world to fund back Social Security, so that it has a savings account. Like, as if you opened up a business tomorrow, you better have money in savings, because you're going to be at a loss. So you should always have an amount of money in savings in your checking account so that you can run it the day it opens up. Because you don't get any sales or flow of things coming in the moment you open up the doors, most of the time. So we have to fund back in Social Security, the fund in there, and say, Congress, you don't get any, you can never touch it. There's no one who is allowed to touch it. Do you realize that the Fed, the way that they have their SWIFT system, is a way to touch into all the different funds of every single thing worldwide? And I'm not just talking about the Fed hitting everything worldwide, but all the central banks have that touch point into accounts, unless you are outside of the banking realm. And then they'll try to use IRS things and, income tax points. You have to kill it like that. You can't kill it slowly, because you still keep the funding in for the idiots. And this conversation that happened here the other day with, I'm talking on the 22nd here, and last week, where they were about ready to shut the government down, and they had 1,500 page, right? And they went down to 116 pages. We really don't even know exactly which one. Did they pass the 116 pages? Did they pass portions of the 116 pages? We're not hearing the whole thing, but they passed a very slimmed down kind of point. when you do a slim down kind of point, they took away a ton of fat. Just think about go from 1,500 pages to 116 pages. Tons and tons of fat. That means you're saying the IRS basically is gone. Trump is trying to tell you that, but are you listening? It's hard to listen because he doesn't speak, he's speaking with, in essence, weird metaphorical kind of statements out there. But you gotta like suss through what he's saying. And when you suss through it, you realize he's been talking the same thing I've been talking about since 2020. I know he knows about it, but now it's time to release it. It's time to release all that IRS stuff. Does that make sense? Hope it does. Guys, go to drscottyoung.com. You can download a whole cool lot of stuff out there. Download some information. You can go to Dr. Scott Nassara. This is the only Telegram page. At Twitter, it's at Dr. Scott Young. Simply, very simple. There are thousands of fakers. I'm the only one that's doing it. Okay? Thanks so much.